All right, everybody. Today we broke out of Shoe Tree a little bit early. We got an invite down to Black Rabbit Meads, and we're gonna go check it out. So I'm Jeff Young, aka Dr. Beergood, and this is Road Trippin' with Shoe Tree. All right, guys, we made it. We're here at Black Rabbit Mead. I'm joined by Will and Jake. And first of all, today I want to thank you guys for having us out. We're really excited to be out here and learn about the mead making process and learn some new things.
Our pleasure, man.
I guess we could just start out by maybe you guys telling us a little bit about how you got into mead and how that led you to this place.
Sure, yeah. So Will and I were both high school teachers, actually in Carson City. We taught at Silver State Charter School, and we worked, our math teacher there was the owner of a company called Al Bees, so he sells honey like all over Washoe County and keeps bees all throughout the Sierra Nevadas. And he had a bunch of honey that had crystallized, and he's like, hey, you guys want to make some mead out of this? And we're like, what's mead?
Yeah.
But I've done a bunch of home brewing, and Will has an extensive background in biology, so he liked to tinker around with stuff. I like to tinker around with stuff, and then our hobby kind of became a passion.
So you guys picked it up quick, I take
Oh
it.
yeah, I mean, Will's kitchen was filled with little jars of mead, like within
That sounds
probably
familiar.
2 months. Yeah,
The walls were real sticky.
And then we got a little space actually over on Mill Street, yeah, and we built out this basement area and kind of had our own little production area. We rented it out from a buddy of ours, and we just started having little tastings with friends and family, and they got super into it, and we just started upping more and more production. We're like, all right, we either have to start spending more time with our families, but we have to make this a real business. And,
Nice.
we chose the business, I guess.
Yeah, I love that.
And then the school that we're at was actually kind of closed down, and this building opened up. Ryan with Lee Dog was going to lease out the whole building. He was going to take the other half for storage. He's not there now, but it just kind of shoved us in. And we were like, all right, all in.
Yeah.
So Will's dad had recently retired from being at GC for 30 years. So like we built as much as we could legally build out ourselves. We did here.
Yeah, same.
So these were like little offices, and the back was a dump. So we gutted the whole place and built the bar from the ground up and redid
Dude, that's awesome.
most things in here.
All sweat, all sweat.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, it's the only way when you're starting out. You got to save that money. You don't know.
for sure.
You know, it's like,
Yeah, it's a really expensive industry to get into and a really complicated industry to get into.
is it?
Well, especially from 2 high school teachers.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's, I think a lot of us dream of turning our passion into a career, and we're all in support and will cheerlead people on when they do so. But there's of course a lot more to turning your passion into a career than the passion itself.
Yeah.
And, you know, when it comes to just understanding laws and regulations, the business side of things, the construction side of things.
Yeah. The nuts and bolts.
Yeah,
The fun part.
It's not just brewing mead and drinking and hanging out all day.
I know. You know, that's what everybody thinks about
Yeah.
brewing too. It's like we drink all day. I tell everybody, like, think of me as a beer janitor, because most of my job is cleaning all day long.
Yeah.
So, like, if you think you're gonna be a brewer and it's gonna be all prestigious, like, think again. It's mostly janitor work.
Yeah.
No doubt, no doubt.
Right on. Well, I think I'm excited to get to tasting some of you guys' excellent meads, and you guys can maybe walk me through what I'm tasting and maybe a little bit about the process of making it, and then we'll go check out the back and
Cool.
see the equipment.
There we
Sound
go.
like a plan?
Sounds great.
So there's a couple different classes bread and butter, what we specialize in is what we call cider style meads. And so those are meads that are going to be about 6.9% ABV. They're going to be carbonated, semi-dry. And then we put different fruits, herbs, and spices in them to make them really different from one another. From there, we start to blend them in with other tasty things. So for instance, we do what we call a beer style mead, in which we work in collaboration with different breweries, and we do an in-the-keg blend with their products. And so that's a real fun take on beer. It generally lightens the flavor up a little bit, gives it just like a wee bit more sweetness, even though our stuff really isn't that sweet to begin with. But then we also do what we call cocktail style meads. And so with those, we fortify the meads with different liquors and juices and things of that sort to make what really drinks like a dang good cocktail. Yeah, mead can be used for a variety of things, right? You can just drink it up itself, or you can use it similarly to how you would use like tonic or champagne when you're making a cocktail. And so we usually think about that as we develop those cocktails. Welsh word for medicine actually comes from the word mead.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then it was also used in very sacred ceremonies and infused with potentially hallucinogens to give, oracles, different spiritual powers and things of that sort.
That's so cool. It's so neat to have that sort of history to kind of play off of and do things with. So what do you think I should start with?
Well, let's have you start right here. Church of Roger, that's our base mead, named after my dad, Roger.
Love it.
Oh, cool.
And this place, for better or worse for him, became his church that he spent every day of the week almost, including Sundays. And he really just helped us build it out. So we didn't give him any money for that. Instead, we just give him free alcohol.
He doesn't have to pay for his own.
He doesn't really,
So what am I looking for? This is just, it looks light.
Yeah.
So I'm going to taste it. I smell it.
Taste it. As you're doing that, I'll describe it a little bit. So Church of Roger, it's our base mead, just honey, water, and yeast.
Oh my God.
And it's a very simple, delicate mead.
Yeah.
It's great to start out with this one because that's how all our meads start out.
Okay.
And then by trying that one first, you're able to pick up on those very subtle honey notes in the background. You're going to notice not too sweet. There's definitely like an earthy funkiness that the honey imbues into the mead. And it's just a very light, refreshing, simple drink.
I love this. It's so crisp and clean. Like, I could drink this on a summer day out on the patio, man. Like, as light as it is complex. Like, I get a ton of flavors coming through there. And I can really taste the honey in that.
So, there are folks that come here, that's the only thing that they want to drink. It's their favorite mead. But that one is a pretty niche mead for us, just because of how simple and really light those flavors are.
Yeah. Really cool, you guys. Thank you. What's this guy?
This one is the branch of the McBroom. So this one is strawberry, rhubarb, and oak.
Oh,
so, yeah.
I love rhubarb. Oh, I went too far, you guys. Sorry. Oh, wow. Oh, that almost has some like barrel flavor to it.
Yeah.
Almost an
that
oaky.
oak,
Yeah.
Because we add oak chips into
Did
that
you?
too.
Okay, yeah. I'm picking up oak. Oh my God. That oak is perfect on that. Mead goes really well with oak, huh?
It can if you have enough body to the
Okay.
If it was just a pure oaked mead, it might feel like a very watery whiskey.
Okay.
But if you can get other ingredients in there or enough body into that mead, it can carry that oak flavor really well.
Wow. I'm feeling so much better.
I imagine, man.
You know what I mean? I was a little nervous earlier, but now I'm feeling plenty fine. 9 for 9. Not one stinker in the bunch. So
Those are
I could
bestsellers,
seriously just sit down and have a nice night off of any one of these. So I'm excited about this guy. Tell me about this one.
Sure, man. So yeah, this is has been one of our big pride and joys for this winter. This is what we call St. Johnny's, named after one of America's greatest saints, Johnny Appleseed.
Yes.
So here we fortify one of our meads, particularly our Church of Roger. The very first mead you started out with, which has some nice earthy, funky flavors to it. And then we fortify it with apple brandy and apple whiskey. We make a cinnamon simple syrup in-house, put a bit of that in there, and then just a little bit of lemon juice. We mix that all up, pour it out of the tap over some ice, and then add just a couple dashes of bitters.
Let me try it. Here we go. Cheers. Thanks again for having us out,
Oh,
you
my
guys.
pleasure, man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I can see why that is the best seller, man. That is good. That's super refreshing. Like, I could just... It's like you can't even tell there's alcohol in that. You could get into big trouble on that.
You
thing.
certainly can.
I got a warm belly. You know?
No doubt.
More people need to know about how good a job you guys are doing here. It's really, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, you guys, thank you for having us in. And thank you for just tasting me all these wonderful meads. They're fucking good. And I'm feeling good.
So it's a long story, but the short of it is we really enjoy that old English pub naming tradition where it was always the something, right? The prancing pony or the green dragon. And so we wanted to honor that part of our history and meat's history. And so we were like, all right, these something. And oftentimes it was like an adjective and a noun, right? And particularly that noun was an adjective or like an animal. And so we were thinking, we're just going through a lot of the different plants and animals that are celebrated through this area. And we landed on the jackrabbit. And then lo and behold, the black-tailed jackrabbit is the most popular jackrabbit in our area here. So we landed on the Black Rabbit because we felt, like it's a little, mead's still a little underground. It's definitely up and coming. There's certainly an edgy quality to it. So
Gives
we
it
felt
a
like
little bit of that English feel.
Yeah, so the Black Rabbit is kind of where it came from, and then we toyed around for a long while. Black Rabbit Mead Company, and so we landed on Black Rabbit Mead Company. Oftentimes people know of us, and we even say it's just Black Rabbit Meads.
I said that earlier.
And I made fun of him.
Yes, dude.
I'm like, it ain't
We were
meads.
driving down and I was like, let me just do an intro. Like, hey, we're leaving Shoe Tree a little bit early. We're going to head down to Black Rabbit Mead. And I said, Black Rabbit Meads. And he's like, I get done. And he's like, it's meads? Black Rabbit Meads? And I'm like, I thought it was. They have more than one,
Well,
right?
then he got in my head. I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. It is.
Then we looked at
More
it,
than one mead.
Then I was all, well, whatever.
It is. We end up thinking that honey is this pretty old school thing, and therefore might need to be in some big giant, Winnie the Pooh mason jar. But this is like high quality honey when it's produced at a big scale. This is what they put it in.
Maybe you can just take me a little bit through your, I don't know, it's not a brewing process,
Yeah.
is it?
Well, I
Or a
mean, we call it
meat-
a brewing. It's technically a fermenting
And
process.
you're like
It's
a
had
mead
heat.
maker, right?
Technically or traditionally called a mazer.
A mazer?
A mazer.
Mazer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we there's a deep history to mead, and there's a lot of old school terminology that's very obscure that us mead makers can be quite proud of in our circles. But when it comes to like relating with anyone and everyone else, we oftentimes just take on craft beer terminology.
Yeah.
So
A brewmaster.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. All right. So here we are in a brewery when it's
Right.
technically a meadery.
But so let's see. You're
Yeah,
gonna
so
get
we
the
can.
honey?
So I break up. We break up mead production in about 4 phases.
Okay.
with phase one, we call that our fermentation phase.
Okay.
And so more or less we mix a whole bunch of honey together with a little bit of water, just so the honey flows a little smoother.
Yes, okay.
And we make sure that we don't heat it up beyond 110 degrees because we like to keep some of those really delicate qualities to honey. So we mix some honey and water together, we pump it into the tank, and then we fill that tank up till about 400 gallons.
Okay.
And then we mix in some nutrients to it. And we activate the yeast with some other nutrients.
Okay.
And then we put it all together and we stir it around. And then we let that sit for about a week. And then during that week, we'll definitely do some things to it. We don't just leave it alone. We'll put different types of nutrients in it in different stages. And then we'll also be adding oxygen to it by just a massive drill wand because yeast in those early stages, they love their oxygen. So that really helps them out. From there, we move on to phase two, where we simply arrest the yeast and then we transfer them into a fresh tank. Because the yeast can handle up to 15% alcohol, but we like to stop them at 7%, and therefore we only put in enough honey to get them to 7%. So when we transfer them into here, as I say, we arrest them, and that allows us to put a little bit more honey back into it, because at that point the yeast had gobbled up all the sugars, and it's bone dry to a degree that would not be very tasty.
Okay. So yeah, you're gonna back sweeten it a little bit. Okay.
Exactly. So once we back sweeten, at that point we're able to put in all the different fruits, herbs, and spices that make our meads different from one another. And usually we'll do that in smaller batches, unless it's a really popular thing for distribution, and then we might do it into
One
a big tank.
guy.
Yeah. Oftentimes, though, it ends up in one of these smaller barrels or a couple of these smaller barrels. And so here we have that slightly back sweetened honey, and then we add a bunch of different things. So BL, this is probably going to stand for our BL Bliss. This is going to be our blueberry lemon mead. So here we put in those crushed freeze-dried blueberries and some fresh lemon juice, and we let that sit for about 2 weeks. Actually, we'll probably put in the blueberries first for about 2 weeks, and lemon juice doesn't need much to really mix in with the mead, so we'll do that maybe a couple days before we move that mead onto its final phase. And that's phase 4, or you may have noticed that we skipped a step there, phase 3. That's our aging step. We've kind of combined phase 2 and phase 3 together to where as it's infusing with the different fruits, herbs, and spices, we just let that go for a good amount of time. We'll probably pull the infusion bag, but we'll keep them in barrel at that point. And then we transfer them from those barrels into a bright tank. And that allows us to get the mead down to a real cold temperature, generally around 32 degrees or so. And that allows us to hook up a CO2 tank and
start carbonating
start carbonating the mead. We do that for a couple hours. And then we wheel out our bottler and start bottling it into 22-ounce
off
bottlers.
of the
Or
tank.
we'll, actually what we find, it's a little easier for us to control the different pressures by first putting it in a keg and then bottling it from
a keg. So you'll keg. Do you guys still call this a bright beer or a bright
tank?
Bright tank.
Yeah. We actually got this from a brewery in town that unfortunately is no longer in operation, but Under the Rose Brewery. We picked it up. Yeah, just from right down the street. It was fun to just put it on the forklift and take it on down here.
Just whip it down, huh?
Yeah.
I was curious, when you say you arrest the yeast, is that just like
we
a
can keep it on
potassium
camera, too.
sorbate, or you're essentially just making sure that they're not going to keep fermenting when you add the new honey, right? So that
Exactly. Yeah, so we need to arrest the yeast right after phase 1 because even though they're not fermenting so much in that moment because they've gobbled up all the sugars, we don't want it to be bone dry. And so to get them to not gobble up the honey the bit more of honey that we're about to put into it, we use a little bit of potassium sorbate. And well, first we hit them with a little bit of sulfite, potassium sulfite,
yeah.
and then within about 24 hours we hit them with some potassium sorbate, and then we transferred over into a fresh barrel. So I mean, far under the concentrations that you're even going to find in dried apricots, and very much a standard in the wine industry, at least that we picked it up from. But it's proved to be very helpful for us in different ways. It helps with some off-gassing as well of some compounds that aren't as desirable in the flavor profile, but it also preserves the mead when we put all those other things into it.
That's
all
true.
the fruits and herbs and spices that we, as I say, we generally, we will play with some concentrates and some essences here and there just to kind of like round off some flavors from time to time, but we generally like to stick with the fresh stuff, and those things can introduce, you know, foreign contaminants that the sulfite and the or particularly the sorbates.
Well, you were talking about you have like a mother yeast, so you may just be growing up yeast on the backside, right? Like
don't even need to do that so much.
Don't?
Yeast is actually pretty cheap for us.
So
Out of all the things that we buy, except maybe from some of our nutrients, yeast is one of the cheapest things for us. So we just order it fresh every single time from the lab, and then just dump it in.
That's so nice.
Yeah, no, our commercial brewer friends are always a little envious of us and how that we don't need to do that to really maintain costs.
Yeah, generations and just maintaining a healthy yeast strain over generations is technically challenging.
Yeah,
for sure.
now we have Lalvin Labs.
So you just got to start fresh each time. That's
every time, just cut open the bag and pour it on into it.
Do you guys come with a dry yeast or a wet yeast? Dry?
Yeah, we use a dry yeast, but then we use a Go Firm to get it activated, which is just a really hardy activation nutrient for yeast.
Yeah, because you're a little bit higher ABV than most beers.
Sure.
And then, so you just kind of need a real hardy yeast for that, right?
Yeah, and certainly in our initial years of just like tinkering around. I mean, we still tinker around tons, but just to come up with, you know, a good drinkable product, we played with a lot of different yeasts, and we played with different honeys as well, and just all the different variables. But the yeast was definitely one of the most significant, as any brewer is going to tell you. And we found a yeast that just works really well for us. You know, we have a pretty simple and humble operation here at Black Rabbit, and so we need a yeast that can handle a nice range of temperatures and not get too stressed out by that. Our yeast also naturally brings out some more tropical fruity flavors in our meads, which pairs really well with the rabbit brush and alfalfa honey that we use. So yeah, our yeast are, you know, as I was saying before, we're yeast farmers, right? Similar to dairy farmers, and the particular strain of yeast that we have, just like the strain of cow that a dairy farmer might be proud of. I mean,
depending upon what yeast.
It is a god to us. This
I gotta use
particular
the
strain
restroom real quick.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Where is it? Okay, you guys, we had a blast here at Black Rabbit Meads. These guys were super cool. They're doing some super creative stuff. If you don't get down here and try it, you're fucking stupid. You understand me? You're fucking stupid. Get here and try it. Support local. Reno, these guys are killing it. They're fucking badass. Be here. Peace, Dr. Beergood. Shoe Tree.
Just drunk.
Road tripping with Shoe Tree. Dr. Beergood, aka Jeff Young. Peace. You can't record me, I'll fuck up.